Political parties, lesson 6. Let's first talk about what political parties are. Political parties, in a nutshell, are a group of people who seek to control government through winning elections and holding public office. Now, political parties are not found in the Constitution. In fact, the Constitution makes no mention of political parties and their processes. They have evolved over years to fill a function that was left out of the Constitution, and that is the way in which candidates are chosen for nomination and later become and win public office. Now, they began as clubs, and so as our country first started, everybody kind of had their own idea about how government should run. Probably the biggest sections of people began as clubs, and they became political parties. So they would begin meeting and talking about, we really like a strong central government, or maybe those strict constructionists that really felt like the Constitution should only be followed word for word and not be added to. They began meeting, and so on and so forth. And so these clubs that became political parties, in order to kind of get their opinions out there, thought, hey, let's nominate Joe in our club to run for the office of senator or president so that he can kind of propel our ideas. And so this is really how it began and came to start with the nomination process. Now, political socialization happens through 4 primary ways. Some of you have probably already begun the political socialization process, the way in which we kind of get our political opinions from our family is kind of how we get that first. And so if some of you are at home with parents, be it discussing things at the dinner table, or your parents have political things on TV that they're listening to and you're really not paying attention, but they're still on. You're getting some of that subconsciously, you're hearing about it, you're familiar with these words and these terms that are being used, or people in government, and that's really how your political socialization starts. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, I don't listen to this stuff and it's not on in my house, and that's okay. You're probably getting things from school, or you're beginning to get things from school. Maybe by this class is the first time. So school is also a means in which you will develop your political opinions. You'll start saying, hey, I like that idea. I don't like that idea. I believe that, be it social things or taxes or government functions. Some of you are so interested in politics, you might actually discuss this with your friends, although that is less common. And then out in the community, you'll see signs in yards and so forth when elections are near. You'll see postcards in the mail educating people about a particular candidate or voting on an initiative, on a ballot, etc. Now, if you look at the spectrum here, you'll see that most Americans fall in the middle of the spectrum, at one end being massive government control and the other end being anarchy or no government at all. And so as people run for office through political parties, those candidates will target the biggest group of people, those in the middle where most Americans fall. Now, let's talk about the 3 values of political identity briefly. They are freedom, order, and equality. So freedom simply means you have the freedom to or the freedom from. So freedom to is that there's no constraint. Freedom from is protection against action. So those are the 2 types of freedom that we're talking about. Now, order is simply putting things in a safe environment. There's an orderly establishment of relationships. So for instance, in our school building, I'm a teacher, but the order of the chain of command would be administrator and then teacher and then student. Now, equality has to do with social and economic equality, also political equality. So here also you might find socialism, where you have equal distribution of wealth to make it more equal across all areas in social order. Now, the ways in which we think that these are the most important really determine what kind of political group that we belong to. So you can see here we have liberals and conservatives. It's important to note that Democrats tend to believe more liberally. Conservatives or Republicans tend to believe more conservatively about values and ideas. So with this, it's also important to point out that more people nowadays will consider themselves liberal or conservative rather than Democrat or Republican. So if you notice here on our chart, you'll see that the ways in which liberals and conservatives rank these three values would be equality, freedom, and order for liberals, and then order, freedom, and equality for conservatives. So those are exactly opposite, rotating around that second value, which would be freedom. So equality, Democrats would say overall is the most important value. So an equal playing field, one voice, one vote, etc. Now freedom to and freedom from are the second most important quality. And last would be order, creating a safe environment. Conservatives flip-flop that and tend to believe that order is by most, and the relationships are the most important. Freedom from and freedom to would be second most, and then the equality kind of takes third place here. Now, as you're going through and writing down definitions of what does equality mean, what does freedom mean, what does order mean, I want you to begin thinking about how you rank these three values. Now, with libertarians always favor freedom, and they could throw order and equality out. Populists would completely kind of flip-flop and change it up from conservatives and Republicans, always valuing equality, so having that in common with Democrats. But second important would be order, which would make that a common ground with conservatives, and equality would be last. Now, I want you to take a moment to jot down a couple common political parties in the United States. We have a two-party system here, and that means that by and large, Democrats and Republicans always win national offices, and at the state level, really. That third-party candidates are very rarely elected and hold public office. We do have a few, but by and large, Democrats and Republicans win the majority of office. Now, let's move on to the sociological theory, which is a theory, but that states that people who are upper class vote Republican and people of working class vote Democrat, as well as people who live in urban or city areas vote Democrat, and people who live in rural areas vote Republican. Now, you may or may not know that to be true, and that is a broad generalization, but that is the theory of politics, is that typically when we look at demographics, that's what this theory is stating, that we notice that people who make more money are generally Republican, and people who live in city areas are generally Democrat. Now, there are four types of minor parties. They are ideological, single issue, economic protest, and splinter parties. Now, the three probably most common types of minor parties are Libertarian, the Green Party, and the Constitution Party. The Libertarian Party, remember, they value that freedom over everything, and that is kind of laissez-faire politics, meaning hands-off, small government, socially liberal, and fiscally or money-wise conservative. The Green Party being progressive and advocating for change in eco-socialism, and the Construction Party, or Constitution Party rather, being socially and fiscally conservative, and tendency to merge both religion and government. Now, ideological parties emphasize a particular idea or set of beliefs rather than appealing to the broad base. So you could argue that minor parties or ideological parties in general don't really serve the purpose to gain a public office, but rather get their ideas out there and make them known. It's more global or worldly, or kind of a general overview of how they believe the United States should be run. Now, a single issue party is one that kind of revolves around just one issue. For instance, the Prohibition Party sought to get prohibition started, get sale and consumption of alcohol illegal. And so once that happened, that party kind of disintegrated, and that's usually what happens to single issue parties. Once that issue is over and done, they tend to die out. Now, economic protest parties tend to be money centered, and once whether it be taxes or income, once that be settled, then their purpose has been served. And then splinter parties are little parties that break off of bigger parties, primarily the Democrat and Republican Party. So they share a lot of the same values as Democrats and Republicans, but they kind of splinter away. Probably the best known one is the Reform Party with Ross Perot in 1992 is a good example of a splinter party from the Republicans. Now, this is the conclusion of Lesson 6. Feel free to play it over and pause as needed.